Welcome to Underworld UK, where Britain's darkest stories are brought to light. From the gritty streets of gangland London, Liverpool, Manchester and Birmingham, from Curtis Warren to the Cray twins to county lines and modern-day true crime, we cover everything. Bringing you new videos every week. Subscribe so that you'll be notified when the next video is put out.
Warren Slaney is one of the greatest warlords that ever walked through the Cathays in history. That is fact. You can't get away from that. All the big names you never had your one of your altercations, but I saw little things in mixes and little exchanges in letters and words that meant that you didn't really want to fight. You wouldn't want to really tangle with him. In his 20s and 30s, he was unbeaten. No, you got to talk the truth. You got to talk the truth. Everyone fell over. That is a fact.
Warren Slaney has been behind bars for more than 30 years. He was convicted in 1992 of what became known as the Hot Dog Murders in Leicester. He is currently serving a double life sentence. To some, Slaney is one of the hardest, most feared men in Britain's prison system. So others, he is a victim of one of the country's most troubling miscarriages of justice. The case that put him in prison began on the 28th of August 1990. In the quiet Leicestershire town of Oadby, two men were shot dead outside a house on Glen Road. The victims were Gary Thompson, a 35-year-old businessman who ran a chain of hot dog vans, and his employee, John Weston. The murders became known locally as the climax of the so-called Hot Dog Wars. Rivalries between mobile catering businesses were intense, with competition for the most profitable pitches around Leicester, Birmingham and Nottingham. The sums involved were significant. Thompson, known as the Hot Dog King, was said to be collecting around £60,000 from his business when he was ambushed. Neighbours reported hearing gunfire shortly after 4 a.m. Thompson was hit multiple times and died at the scene. Weston was fatally shot as he tried to escape. The gunmen fled into the night, taking the money with them. Police launched a major investigation. Their focus soon fell on Warren Slaney, a 28-year-old from Leicester with a history of minor offences. Alongside another man, Terence Burke, Slaney was arrested, charged and brought to trial. In 1992, at Leicester Crown Court, both men were convicted of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. Slaney has always insisted he was innocent. His defence relied heavily on an alibi. On the night of the killings, he said he had been at a family party until around 4:30 in the morning. 9 people came forward to support that claim. They included his relatives and family friends. Despite this, the jury chose to believe the prosecution.
3 knockouts in 1 week. This is how it went. So, in Whitemore, right, when you come out for your dinner, there's tables and chairs down on the ones, because you've got 1s, 2s and 3s, right? I used to live up on the 3s. Warren was on the 2s, not far from me, round about that side, because when I used to play the 80s rare grooves and the soul-y kind of tunes, he used to all shout out the window, Yammy, play that one back for me. I said, which one? He said, Dreaming. And Sugar Free. Yeah. He loved his soul music, Warren. Anyway, so when you get your dinner, you come through, you sit on the chairs, right? Sometimes, because Warren doesn't have many friends that he has around him. The truth be told, there's always one man who he loves in one jail. That's how it goes. The rest is just, hello, good, are you cool? Yeah, all right, sweet as. Yeah, sometimes I wonder I think Warren was half a Cockney as well sometimes. Sometimes I think he might have even been born in London. I'm not too sure. Don't quote me on that one, but I know that he lived in London at some stage in life when he was a youngster. And he's got the same background heritage as me. How about that? You didn't know that, like, did you? But you do now, right? So when I sit at the table with him, we know what it's like. with Warren Slaney. I've given you a couple of videos already. I don't think I've let you know how this week went, this 7 days in particular, right? So when I used to sit at the table with him and eat dinner and talk, and he runs these funny jokes, if you don't laugh, he looks at you a bit funny. And I think, look back at him and I think, why you got to look at me? Because he's good at picking up senses. He's very sensitive to certain things. He's not a happy man in there being in there for something he ain't really done. You know what I mean? It's as simple as that, man. So I would be angry, if you get what I mean. But no, the truth be known, he loved me. Simple as that. So we used to sit down at the table, right? He said, Yammy, you know what? You know when my fights happen? He said, there's always 3 that come at once. I said, I know. I've seen this and heard this before, Warren. So that means, so I'm reading it now, I'm thinking, well, who have you got in mind, right? I've got to think that way with my mate Warren Slaney, right? So he goes, yeah, you know, it just happens that way, Yam. All right, Warren, I know. Fighting, hitting someone, knocking their blocks off. That's your game. Especially in that environment. If they let you out, they should have let you out a long time ago. You would have been all right. You was a ladies' man, you know, like that, Warren. So my mind's working overtime, right? He's turned up now in Whitemore. Charlie Lawson is on the other wing. I was on the other wing with Charlie Lawson until something happened on the wing that I was on. So I ended up with Warren on his wing, and Warren just come. But while I was with Charlie Lawson, a fight took place years earlier in the Cates, 8 years earlier. Charlie Lawson, Stevie Lydia from Manchester. Allegedly, I wasn't in the cell that day. They argued, they called it on, they went in there. Steve banged him in the mouth, right? And Charlie, it ended up in a little wrestle. Stevie Lydia, his best mate at that time, is Warren Slaney. Warren, he hasn't let Warren know that he's fighting in the cell, but Warren would notice that you're not around and he will come looking for you. So Warren's turned up after the first bag's been thrown in. They're in a little wrestle kind of thing. So Warren, even though Stevie Lydia can beat up many, many men, right? So, and Charlie can as well. Remember Charlie, them days, especially before that time I saw Charlie Lawson 8 years later, right? Charlie was like big and thingy, and Charlie knocks out a lot of screws and he has done loads of fights. It's not an easy win, right? That time there. So it ends up in a wrestle. Warren pushes open the door, comes in just as it's at that stage, and then gets in between, tries to bang him, but it's all mucky in there. And Charlie's bit one of their hands. I can't remember which one it was, but where they had him tied up a little bit, he bit one of their hands. It all got stopped. The screws come, whatever. It got separated. You got moved, right? So while I was with Charlie in Whitemore, he was saying to me, yeah, but Yammy, man, I would have won that day, you know. They never put me away. Look who was in the room with me. I'm thinking, yeah, Charlie, really? The great Warren Slaney. Because Yammy, man, sometimes you don't know it was me. I said, oh, okay, cool. Warren turns up now, Whitemore, years and years later. Charlie ain't doing his own work. He don't even know that he's in the jail, right? So it's even in gym. We go down the gym. Nelly's there, Leader's there. I think Matthew was there. I wouldn't be surprised if the great Porky was there. I think even Tiny was there, right? So Warren, I realised, knew that he was going gym in the evening. He don't normally go gym in the evenings, Warren, during that stage. So I know now that Warren knows what list Charlie Lawson's on. So that means to me, he shouted across to the big man, Martin. He said, yeah, who's my man there? I need to address that. So I clocked it straight away. Charlie, after the gym session, because Warren doesn't really do weights, he does a lot more fitness and the cross machines and the circuits and that kind of stuff, right? So Charlie's gone to get a shower early into the changing rooms, right? But I'm watching all this, I'm thinking, please, Warren, that one's old, leave it. He ain't gonna leave that alone. He bit one of you. To Warren, that's never finished. If it ain't finished, he's gonna finish it at some stage. So Charlie's come out the shower, putting his clothes on. Warren says to me, Yammy, can you hold the door for me, please? Make sure no one don't come in. I thought, oh, no, you ain't, are ya? He's walked into the changing room, shower room. Charlie's got his clothes on. Our Pete looked in. Slaney went like that with his legs. he wiped the floor, like, because you know the floor's wet. He wipes his feet on it and looked at Charlie. Charlie's face just went white as a ghost, and Charlie ain't no mug, you know. You know what I mean? Let's get that right. And his face looked like, oh no, not you. But you didn't say that to me a few years earlier, Charlie. Warren's walked up to him. Charlie put his hands up. Warren just went bang, bang. It was all over. Your eyes split, all blood everywhere. I said, get out of here, Warren. Come out. So we come out. The medic people come. Charlie was sitting on the thing, and Charlie's my boy, you know. We're not belittling nobody here. He's sitting on the chair, but he's holding his eye. And Nelly's walks up to me. It's not funny, really, you know. Let's have it right. But he just is Nelly. I thought it was hard, yeah. I thought he looks like a vixen. All the screws are saying, who did it? It weren't him, was it? And me and Slaney are sitting on the chair like that. I said, all right, boom. We've gone back to the wing. I looked at Warren. I said, he goes, I'll let him off, really.
Eyewitness descriptions of the attackers raised immediate questions. 2 people reported seeing a gunman fleeing the scene. They described him as tall, over 6 feet, broad-shouldered, with a moustache and a ponytail. Warrant Slaney at the time was 5'8", slim, clean-shaven, and had short hair. There was no forensic evidence against him. Despite 4 separate police searches, nothing was found at his home to link him to the crime. No fingerprints, no weapon, no blood-stained clothing. Slaney later said of the verdict, "It felt like the ground had opened beneath me. I knew I hadn't done it, but the jury didn't want to hear that."
Criticism has also been levelled at his legal representation. His solicitor was not brought onto the case until 2 weeks before trial. He spent just 3 hours with defence witnesses. The prosecution, by contrast, called evidence over the course of 8 full days. One prison campaigner, reviewing the case years later, said it was a shambles of a defence. If you wanted to create a recipe for wrongful conviction, you'd start here. Slaney's appeal was heard in the mid-1990s, but the process was beset by delays and failures. Important papers were mislaid. Fresh evidence was not properly introduced. When the case finally came before the Court of Appeal, it was dismissed within hours. The years that followed saw increasing pressure from campaign groups. The Miscarriages of Justice organisation, West Midlands Against Injustice, and the Innocence Project at the University of Bristol all examined the case. They argued that critical evidence had been ignored. One example came from a man who admitted helping to dispose of the murder weapon. He gave a statement saying Slaney had no involvement in the killings. That evidence was never disclosed at trial. Another prosecution witness later admitted that he had fabricated parts of his testimony. Again, the jury never heard that. There were also medical issues. Slaney had metal plates in his hands from earlier injuries. Campaigners argued that this would have made it extremely difficult for him to handle and fire a gun in the way described by witnesses. Yet this was never raised by the defence.
In 2005, the BBC reported on the case and highlighted these inconsistencies. Slaney's mother, speaking to journalists, said, "New witnesses have come forward. I will not give up on my son. We have never stopped fighting for him." As the legal battles rumbled on, Slaney's prison life began to attract headlines of its own. After his conviction, he was moved to a series of high-security jails. Eventually, he was placed inside the Close Supervision Centre at Woodhill Prison in Buckinghamshire. This was a special segregation unit, described by inspectors and the press as Britain's Alcatraz. The conditions inside were severe. Prisoners were kept in near total isolation. Cells were small, furnished only with a concrete plinth for a bed and cardboard furniture. Inmates spent 23 hours a day locked inside. There was no access to television, no newspapers, no education or work. Exercise consisted of pacing in a small outdoor cage, alone, while staff in full riot gear watched on. An inspection report at the time warned, The degree of isolation here is extreme. The regime is more punitive than stabilising. It risks damaging rather than containing those placed under it. Slaney spent years in this environment. He was repeatedly involved in violent incidents with staff. On one occasion, he required 5 stitches after a fight in the exercise yard. Officials installed a camera outside his cell to monitor him continuously. Some prison officers described him as hostile and aggressive. Fellow inmates, however, saw something else. A reputation began to grow. Slaney was labelled the hardest man in prison. Stories circulated about his refusal to back down, his physical toughness, and his ability to withstand isolation. On online forums years later, one former associate claimed, "My dad used to roll with Warren in the 80s. He said Warren was the hardest bloke in British jails. Whatever you think of him, he would never bow to anyone." To others, this reputation missed the point. Campaigners said, "The real story here isn't toughness, it's injustice. A man convicted without evidence has now been buried alive in the harshest regime in Europe." In letters to his supporters, Slaney has described the impact of his confinement. "This is not my life. I want my life back," he wrote. His case has been reviewed several times by the Criminal Cases Review Commission, but so far, no referral back to the Court of Appeal has been granted. Each rejection has been met with anger from his supporters.
In Leicester, family members have marked anniversaries of his imprisonment by releasing balloons, symbolising both hope and the passing years. One campaigner said at a rally, "Every balloon that goes up is another year Warren has lost, but we will not stop until he's free." Today, more than 30 years on, Warren Slaney remains incarcerated. His name continues to divide opinion. Was he one of the killers in the so-called hot dog wars, or has he spent half a lifetime paying the price for someone else's crime? The answer may depend on who you believe. The jury in 1992 believed the prosecution. Slaney's family and campaigners still believe him. What is beyond dispute is the record. No forensic evidence, contradictory eyewitness descriptions, withheld statements, a defence case that appeared underprepared, and a prison regime that has pushed him to the limits of endurance. Warren Slaney's story is one of Britain's most controversial cases. It raises uncomfortable questions about justice, about prison, and about the truth. Whether he is the toughest man in prison or the victim of an injustice, one fact remains. Warren Slaney is still behind bars.
I said, all right, sweet as that. All right, Warren, all right, it's cool. But I'm thinking that's one. When you're talking about 3, I wonder who the next 2 are. Because I watch him carefully. I know who he gets the ump with. Any little thing can niggle him. Even if you're somebody talking to somebody over there and he overhears it and he doesn't like your response to something, he'll look at me and go, I don't like him. So I've got to tick that one off. I think, boy, you better be careful. And I don't mind some of these other people, but I wouldn't put them before Warren anyway. So the next day, Charlie calls me to the fence, right? He says, Yammy, he's got the thing over his eye. He says, I can't fight that guy there. I said, I know. I said, nor can I. He said to me, but in my mind, I was thinking, but you didn't say that 6 months earlier before we got back down here. Do you see what I mean? Anyway, the second one, right? So that comes on top somehow. Warren gets moved to another spur because they're running out of ideas for him, right? So they put him on a spur with Tony was nearby, everybody was there, Friday Pope, Charlie Tozer, all the main heads, no, Rookie Lee wasn't there. Everyone was there anyway in Whitemore at that time. So he's on another spurt, he don't like it, he's shouting at me saying, yeah, I don't like it over here, man, it's too quiet, I don't talk to no one, someone pissing me off. I said, who? And he said, B, Cockney geezer, doing a life sentence, so I don't want to call his name. But I said, yeah, I know he's not everyone's cup of tea, but what does it mean? Well, he said, nah, mate, I'm getting off here. Right. So one of those mornings I heard some commotion, not the bell, I was going to say the bell there. He's knocked him out. He just got out of the chair downstairs. He says, oh, I don't like the sound of you, mate. And he just knocks him clean out another one's eye on the floor. All right, boom. He's got moved again over to the other wing. So I don't have to shout him through the fence no more. He's back over my side. He's back over my side. They put him on red spur, right? So I'm talking to him, so I know that's 2 now. I'm thinking, well, he's talking about. So he's walking around with a big man, Martin V, right? He's come to the fence. He said to me, Yammy, you all right? I said to him, yeah, of course I am, Mark. You all right? He said, yeah. He goes, watch this. I said, no, not again. So this is 7 days now after the first fight. He's walked up. I'm sure these brothers were from Leicester or Nottingham. Carlos and something else. I think they were Italian, you know. But they was cool, you know what I mean? But something's happened where he don't like them. And he just sets the pace and all that. Something was said on the yard before he came to the fence to me. Watch this, you know, Yammy. They're walking around. He gone up to him. Oh, yeah, remember last night? Or something like that. Bang. His ears bleeding and everything. They walk him out, walk him off. Blah, 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 blah. He goes, you see that, Yammy? You see? That's 3 in 1 week. I always tell you it comes in threes, don't I? I said, oh, Warren. No, but it does. That's the way that he wants it to be. Do you see what I mean with Warren? He just wakes up because he has little periods where there's no trouble because he's a cool geezer. He don't really start. He's not a bully or nothing, man. No, he ain't. He ain't no bully, man. He's too short to be a bully. There's many bigger men. Everyone he fights is bigger than him. In certain respects, if you get what I mean. But those piercing blue eyes, when they're looking at you and he's coming for you, you better be on the same wavelength. He's cooled down now. He's doing his sentence properly now, Miriam. He's getting ready, I think, for another appeal. I don't know how it's going to go, but I'm going to do a piece soon about those unsafe convictions. But just what I shared that with you today.
Thank you for taking the time out to watch the video. I really appreciate your support. If you haven't already, could I ask you to like and subscribe to the channel? That really is the best way to help us grow. And in return, we will bring you more videos, more regular like this. Until next time, goodbye and God bless.